Okay, I have my guest, Randy Kitchur again, and we had done an audio section that was going to be on my Cameron Files podcast. I want to follow up because now we're going to do a little section on political. I guess that would be your highlight or your expertise is the political angle. That was where you went in your research. But I want to do a couple of follow-up questions on your sighting thing. Have you ever had any regression? I know you went to Clifford.
No, I don't want to do that. But my reason for that is, my understanding is, once you remember it, you cannot forget it. And I don't think it was a pleasant experience, that half an hour of missing time. I do not want to recall that. I've had maybe a nightmare or two that I think might have been part of it. And if that's what it is, I don't want to remember that. It would have been involving a threat to shut up and don't talk about this anymore. And so I don't want to undergo regression.
Have you done any meditation? You say you've had dreams
Not
that
really.
have given you.
I've had I have really strange dreams where it seems like I go to another planet sometimes. Like even last night, it was like so strange when it was like, wait a minute, this
Are
is
these vivid dreams?
very vivid dreams, yeah, and it's like, they're dreams, okay? Like it's internal versus.
You think they're dreams?
I think they're dreams. I really don't want to go there because I want to separate fact from fantasy, and I can't say a dream is, if you're awake and you can see and you can hear, that's totally different. You know you're awake.
Mm-hmm.
But
have you had any sightings since? Do you think that because you have the sightings back in '81, have you got stuff where they're still motivating you?
Yeah.
They're still keeping you going.
This is related to a person here in Winnipeg, and I'm going to reveal his name. His name is Roy Hebert. He called me up years ago, maybe 8 years ago, and he says, I got your name from the internet, and I see these orbs all the time, and they come out of these vortexes, and he would go on and about this. So for about 2 years, I was listening to this guy. Really nice guy, but he's totally crazy. I will listen to him because I feel affinity with people like that. He's someone reaching out to somebody, trusting somebody, telling him stories, and so he finally told me, Randy, I got some videos. I said, you got some videos? I want to see your videos. So I met him down at the University of Manitoba Medical School Library. That's where I would do my work on the internet, and he showed me this video where it's, if you can imagine a big translucent orb, I guess a vortex in the sky, and it goes like this. It goes pulse, 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 and then it starts from the middle again, pulse, 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 and you see all these orbs flying out of it. I thought, oh my God, we have to create a website with this stuff. So I got in contact with this brother who was, knew the internet more than me, and we created a website called Interdimensional Angels. You just have to Google Interdimensional Angels. And
it's still up?
It's still up, yeah.
Okay.
It's right at the top of the Google search engine. We have all kinds of photos, all kinds of videos. Every photo that you can see there, it's all real. The videos, you're going to see things you've never seen before. Now, what had happened to Roy was he had 2 near-death experiences. And he would actually see himself. He died, actually, and he was floating out of his body. And after the second one, he became aware that these orbs would be following him everywhere he went. So he started snapping pictures, and so we created a website. We put the pictures on there. We would go on skywatches. And during one instance, his wife and his son had gone out to Falcon Lake. And he phoned me up and said, Randy, one was so close I could have reached out and touched it. And said, Roy, I'm coming over to your place tomorrow. We're going to go and do a skywatch, and we're going to see what we see. So went over to his place the next day, and I'm working on the computer, and he gets very anxious when he knows that they're near. He's got this telepathic connection with them. He can ask them to show up, or they'll tell him they'll show up.
How does he know that?
Just internally. It just they pop.
He senses it.
He senses it. I couldn't. There was one instance where they downloaded something to me, but it's not that important.
Why not?
Well, it's because
So you were you able to sense it when he would talk?
to me it was a seamless download. I thought that the thought came from my thought, but it wasn't, and I found that out later. Um, this is skipping ahead. The Stan Fulham did spoke to Rick Thurston, Deep Trance Channel. Stan Fulham, I'll have to explain that later.
Yeah.
But Rick Thurston said that they come through a Stargate vortex, and I was the one that told Roy years before that, we're going to call it a Stargate vortex. But that's what they call them themselves, these interdimensional. We call them interdimensional lasers. We used to call them plasma light entities. But it came to me, and I thought that's a good idea. I'm not going to question where it came from, so I said we're going to call it that. And that's where they come from. So we go in the yard, and I'm out there for like 2 minutes, and all of a sudden, this little blue orb of light just pops into existence, just like from the distance from here to the wall. And I take out a red laser and I laser it with a red laser and it disappears. But a few seconds later, it's higher in the tree, and I laser it a second time, and it goes out.
So it's in the tree. It's not behind the tree.
It's right in front of the tree. In front of the tree.
So how big would it be? Like
about that big.
Okay. Okay.
Perfectly spherical, beautiful blue, so about a week later, he's with his son and his wife getting some goldfish, because he's a very wealthy person, lived in a very nice area at Fort Richmond, and they're getting some goldfish for their backyard. And the wife and the son are in getting the pet store. This is at Pembroke Crossing, where the Pembroke Crossing
Yep.
sign is.
Yeah.
He goes and looks at the top of the Pembroke, and there's this orb that's over top the Pembroke Crossing, middle of daytime. And besides of a Volkswagen, he takes a picture with it, and he does the same thing that James Gilliland does. James Gilliland said that he's an ambassador and that I'm an ambassador. James Gilliland just been at it a longer period of time, and so he asks with his mind the same thing, charge up. Like instead of Gilliland's power up, he asked it to charge up. And so we have two pictures on our website. One of it's relatively dim, but one of them is like this brilliant, but it's the same color, blue, and it's the size of a Volkswagen instead of a little thing. So when he's alone with them, they appear to him much more profoundly. The way that he proved it to me was, this was, I don't know how many years ago, this was actually before this instance, where he said to me, Randy, we would do these sky watches. I would be on my phone in kind of like the Maples area of northwest Winnipeg, and he would be in Fort Richmond, and we do sky watches together, and he'd say to me, Randy, they're going to be outside right above your house at 9:30 tonight. I said, no, they're not, Roy. I said, if you're going to, no, Randy, be outside at your house at 9:30 tonight. I said, well, okay, I'll do it, but they're not going to show up. He said, yes, they will. And so it's August, and it's still, the sky condition's not dark yet, a little bit of cloud, and I'm outside in my yard, and I'm watching my watch, and I'm watching the sky, and it's 9:30, 9:35. Sorry, Roy, they didn't show up. I'm going inside. And I start to walk in the house, and he goes, here they come. And I run back outside, and I look up, and right above my house, there's this orange-yellow ball of light under the cloud, just moving silently. Never seen that before in my life. And I thought, oh my God, it was like 5 minutes difference. And so I'm watching it, but he told me, they're coming. And I'm watching this thing, and I'm going, oh my God, I love you guys. And he says, here comes the other one. I look, right on its tail came the second one. And like 5 minutes difference from when he said. So that totally convinced me. But what he did was he asked them. He's got to ask for them to show up. It's not just randomly. He's got to get their permission and agreement, because they're autonomous entities to themselves. And so there was another instance where I had another sighting. We were at his yard, and this was really dark at night, 12:30, something like that. There's a bonfire. We're sitting there in front of a bonfire, and we're doing our sky watch, and all of a sudden, he just looks at the sky and just freezes. And I'm looking at him and go, what's he looking at? And my gaze just follows him, and then I see this ball of, like right at the edge of the atmosphere, flash, flash, flash. And he said, I just asked them to show up for you, and so, I've got the proof of those experiences as well too. Now these are totally different. These are supposed to be of a divine nature. This is not like an extraterrestrial thing. This is something that comes according to the information we got from the Transcenders, which was the group that Rick Thurston was channeling for Stanford, that they were present at the creation and their creators themselves. Actually, I've got that. I can show you that in the document that I've got, and also where they mention the Stargate vortexes. So this is something that this person here, and I tell people, anybody can have this experience. You just have to have 2 near-death experiences. They'll show up for you.
What was his? Did he have accidents, or how did these happen?
He was a child, and he died of some illness. And I think once he was at home, and when he was in the hospital, and he floats above the ceiling, and he sees everything. Now, what's really unfortunate is that his brother, Kelly, has just recently died. And Kelly helped us out. And what was really strange about this is, I think it was like middle of July. The mother dies. His mother dies, and on the exact same 1 month to the day, it was a Bomber game, and Kelly was going across the street with the nephew or his Kelly's son Adam, and he died of a massive heart attack. But it was 1 month to the day that the mom had died. Now I'm no longer in contact with Roy. There were some issues there. I don't want to get into them. I wish him well, but I really, I spent so much of my life. I spent 7 years working on that website, and that's kind of like I moved on to another person to help, which was Stan Fulham, when he needed help with the book, with his prediction for October 13, 2010, UFOs to appear over New York City. That's a totally separate issue. So if people want information on that, they just have to Google Challenges of Change Google Sites, 2 words. Challenge Change Google Sites, and for the other one, just Google Interdimensional Angels. You'll get. I would tell people, go to the top left-hand corner and look where it says narratives and photos enhancements comparisons, and then look for videos and that kind of thing. But kind of stick to the top left-hand corner, and you'll see videos there, things that are unique in all of human history, and they appear to you if they want to, and they select the people. It's not like you can go out there and force that. They have to pick you. There's no other way to go about
And what's Roy's interpretation is that it's not alien, it's angelic.
Angelic. He, there's no question that this is related to Jesus and the second coming. This is about preparing humanity for when they're coming back, and some divine force that's going to be coming here to Earth soon, and he feels that that's his mission, to help prepare people. But there's nothing extraterrestrial about this. This is like an interdimensional. According to the Transcenders, they come from a 7th dimension. But in my case, I was allowed to see them. But it was a gift for my helping Roy with his website.
And
or I should say on my website, but it's basically. He had to ask for permission. That's the way it was done.
Did he have any sort of downloads during his near-death experiences?
He gets downloads all the time. Yeah, he would get these downloads, but I would never publicize them because he would be like, the world's going to end tomorrow, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to put that stuff out there because I know it's not really. It's just his irrationality in dealing and processing this information. So you can. Yeah. You can see them and you photograph them, but you can maybe not interpret what the message is. It filters, and I guess it's based on your biases, what you're brought up with. That kind of thing.
How would you justify that, like, in terms of missing predictions and stuff like that?
Well, he got like predictions right in terms of them showing up, but he is very heavily influenced by his church, and I guess...
Is he a Christian?
Yes, extremely so, like end-time biblical kind of person, So that's probably the reason why you would, not look at it from the message that you want to communicate, because he's jumping to conclusions. It's just based upon his personal belief system that he grew up with. But, they've got the videos, he's got the videos, and he's got the photos to prove it.
Yeah, as we all have our biases.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your sighting, and have you got a family history of sightings? Anybody else in your family?
No, no one else. No, even my whole family holds me in the utmost contempt because they think this is a pointless pursuit. There's nothing to it. My mom would say to me, what good are aliens? Can you eat an alien? You know, and so it was like I'd be fighting my parents tooth and nail for, you know, they would not understand this research. You're driven internally. It's like you're driven internally. Nobody else understands it. You don't care because you have this loyalty to, in my case, to the beings that were aboard this craft that I showed you. They know, you know, and what I'm going to do with this in my life, I've got to prove my worthiness. You know, it's like the biblical injunction to much. Whoever much is given, much is expected. That's the way I look at it. You have to communicate this. I don't care people what they think. It doesn't matter to me because their opinion is an opinion, and it's useless.
You had the experience. You know they believe.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's no rootedness in reality for their opinion because it's not based on personal experience.
Do you think that maybe because, as you know, whether it's me, Mark, you, that's generally the pattern, is that your other half doesn't really believe. You have this thing that keeps you grounded, that, you know, you're sort of on your own, and yet you have this drive where you just can't let it go.
Every single woman I've ever been close to or ever told this to in my life, I'm lucky after telling them about the experience if they'll ever talk to me again. And it's very sad and very depressing, but that's the way it is. Women in particular have a very difficult time processing this information.
Yeah. If you haven't had the experience, it's like there, but for the grace of God, why? If you had the experience, it would sort of alter you. It's because you had the experience. Last question, then we'll go to the political end. This Malone guy, how many times did you talk to him? I mean, how many times did you discuss
I've had, I would say in total, maybe about 12 meetings with him over the course of a couple years. The last time I communicated with him was when there was a Mars probe that I think was Phobos or something that was going to Phobos. It mysteriously appeared to be shot down, and was like, if you can remember how many years ago that was a long, long time ago. But that was my last email communication with him, and I lost contact. I know he's no longer at Brock University. I don't know where he is. You know, he probably retired. Like, I'm sure Dr. Sewell's retired. I'm sure Dr. Matson retired. I'm sure Dr. Malone's retired.
Yeah, and why did he leave did you say why he left the NASA program?
The program, they described what their mission was. They were to tell them how the mathematics of this thing worked. And I guess that's a profound
Just the one piece he did.
The one little object.
But did he know there was other pieces or other stuff?
I guess he would have presumed it was, because it's all compartmentalized. You know, they give you a little bit of the puzzle here, but it would have profoundly affected him because he became a professor of philosophy teaching Buddhism and inductive and deductive reasoning and Christianity, like from a philosophical perspective. So going from mathematics to teaching philosophy.
Did he write any books or anything?
I don't know. I've never really checked to see if he's ever.
It'd be interesting to see if he's ever written anything that sort of hints at, you know, where he's talking, but indirectly you could pick up that he's.
I've never done a literature search. Never even thought of that.
Okay, let's go to politics. So you have your sort of your encounter, and you are sort of inspired by political stuff. You have a background in political stuff. So you come to University of Manitoba and you start working on your master's degree, and so go into how the university treats you and how you end up sort of doing the disclosure thing, doing the political thing, and sort of describe who you had encounters with, and you know, these Canadian people that are very high level, and Gates, who I think it starts with. So maybe go through that story.
Okay, so what had happened was I had gotten in touch with Dr. Greer, and I sort of became his unofficial Canadian representative. So I would be the person.
That was after the '91 thing. That's why you were inspired to talk to him.
After 2001.
2001, yeah. Sorry.
I think I was in contact with him before then because I knew Clifford Stone back then. I knew John Maynard back then. I knew Graham Bethune back then. I knew George Filer back then. And I just don't recall how. I think it was the initial one was when Robert Gates gave a presentation. Now Robert Gates is the former Secretary of Defense for the United States. But back then, it was 2001, and it was early 2001, and he was giving a lecture at a place called the Walker Theatre, now called the Burton Cummings Theatre here in Winnipeg. And it was all about oil. And so I went to it, and I was intrigued because he was former CIA director, but at that time he was the the acting dean of the George W. Walker Bush School of Government and Management or something like that at Texas A&M University. And so it said, don't bring in any recording materials, but of course I smuggled in my microcassette recorders, had the very first row, wanted to get the whole thing. And so he's giving a lecture, and essentially what he's doing is providing the rationale of why the U.S. has to go into the Middle East to take over all the oil control of the pipelines to get them from falling into the hands of terrorists. So we would say, first of all, we have to go into Iraq, and then we have to go into Afghanistan, and then Iran. And essentially what he was doing was laying out the groundwork for the whole...
How it happened.
How it happened. So, I don't want to accuse him of that or being... He was part of the people for the New American Century, but, that's just, speculation. But he did the whole thing. And so I became really upset because I knew Greer's witnesses had talked about the military sequestered technology that the military has. So I said, there was a question and answer session. I stood up and I said to him, I'm a friend of Dr. Stephen, I'm aware of Dr. Stephen Greer's work, and he said that there's military sequestered technologies that could provide free energy to the planet. There's no need for these old wars, and I want to put you in touch with Dr. Greer. And so he said, okay, come to talk to me after the lecture. So there were like 300, 400, 500 people there, and I'm the only one who gets the invite, so I get to go up on stage with him afterwards, and there's all kinds of CSIS people and, ready to make sure that I don't harm him in any way. So I'm standing here and he's standing there. And I said, well, I'm going to give you some information. I pass information on to him. And I said, well, I'll also email you this information tomorrow. And he thanked me very much for that. It sounded very interesting. Like he would have known who Greer was, and he would have known that I'm telling him the truth, that there was this military technology. And here's this Canadian guy coming up to him, telling him what he already knows. So he wants to, well, who's this guy? And so I emailed him the next day. But I also get in, that night when I went home, I think this was my first contact with Alfred Weber, too. We created something called the Canadian Exopolitics Initiative, where we were politically lobbying Canadian government officials. And Weber, and I asked, I think, for Greer's contact information. He wouldn't give it to me, so I had to find out on my own. But I emailed Greer, and I said I was in contact with Robert Gates. And so he calls me up, and or I called him up, I forget which one it was, I guess maybe he called me up. And so we started talking, and we became really good friends. And so at that point, for about 10 years, I sort of became his unofficial spokesman, where whenever somebody that would be of significance, a mover, shaker in the political world, would come in where I could reach out and touch them or talk to them, I would do that for them. So I would also take on the role of contacting high-level people in the Canadian government. So basically, back then, Robert Gates wasn't, Secretary of Defense, became Obama's Defense Secretary, but it was years after. So he would have known all about this. And Greer actually said that he had briefed Gates through an intermediary. So Gates, before he became Defense Secretary, had already received a briefing from Greer through a third party. So I began to contact people in the Canadian government, and I'm just going to take a look at some of the names that I've got here.
Okay.
Now, it might not mean a lot to American, but these are people that are very high level. Probably the highest level person I spoke to would have been our Deputy Prime Minister, which would be sort of like the Vice President. This was John Maynard. This was back when John Chrétien was our Prime Minister. And he was giving a lecture at the University of Manitoba at the Management School, and I decided, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to ask him if he wants to get a briefing from Greer. Before I had done that, I had actually gone to have a meeting with the RCMP here in Winnipeg, the Major Crimes Division, who screened me for a meeting for the National Intelligence Security section of CSIS, because I was wanting to get something done about these threats that were being made against my friends who were threatened by CSIS. And ultimately nothing became of that. But I soon became aware that I was being monitored as a result of my political activities. So I go to this lecture at the University of Manitoba, and I'm walking up the stairs, and there's this guy standing there with a trench coat. I thought, he's there for me. And I'm starting to walk in, and he says, Randy, can I talk to you for a bit? And I'm Detective Ron Lowe from the RCMP. We'd like to know what you're doing here. And I said, well, I'm here to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to a briefing with Dr. Greer and the people I'm working with. And so I decided at that time, I'm going to make this guy my best friend in the world. So instead of taking this attitude like, how dare you, what are you following me around for? I just sat there, mellowed out, and I sat and talked to him for about half an hour. Chris Rutkowski came walking past us,
Talk to who?
to the detective from the RCMP,
Okay.
Ron Lowe. And or that's what he called himself, and I found out that's not his real name. And so he could be convinced that I'm not a threat, and I walked in there, sat right behind the microphone, because as soon as the question and answer session comes, I'm going to make a beeline for that and invite him. And so this Ron Lowe goes to the far wall, and he just glared at me the entire time that I was there, just could not take his eyes off of me, like he just ready to pounce if I did something. And so the question and answer session opens up, and I go to the microphone second question, and I explain the situation about my friends being threatened by CSIS, and would a Deputy Prime Minister accept a briefing from Greer? They would fly in some, admirals, generals, colonels, astronauts.
And you're using the word UFO, or is it?
No, I didn't use the word UFO. It was just a briefing. What did I describe it as? I could have used the word UFO. Okay, I don't remember, but I might have tried to strenuously tried to avoid the term, because I know when as soon as you hear that, people don't want to hear that. But there was all kinds of media there. It was just incredible. And he said, sure, yeah, he'll accept a briefing. And I said, well, I already gave a package, because as soon as I walked in there, it had all written down. So I gave it to one of his assistants. He said, well, one of your assistants has the information. Please use it to contact me. And so I did get a letter back from them. And ultimately it came to nothing, because they said, well, they've already checked it out. They think they already know the subject. They don't feel that they need a briefing, because they've already gone to the websites and they've seen it all for themselves. So, but and I really couldn't pursue it at that point, because there's so much you can do with it. But one of the one that was most profound, though, was when our former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, before he became Prime Minister, he was leader of the opposition, and he was leader of something called the Canadian Alliance. And I forget how it was I came into contact with him, but his personal secretary, Margaret Poirier, for a good 6-month period of time, they were requesting information from me. So I would send them information, and they would ask for more information. I would keep on sending it back, and I've got all the emails on UFOs and the disclosure project that Dr. Greer was operating. And so for a good 6-month period of time, they were getting this information from me. And so it was finally I decided I'm going to contact someone else, and this is when I contacted a member of Parliament from Alberta, and his name was Leon Benoit. And he actually told me that he had meetings with Harper about the subject. They didn't know what to do about the subject, but they've discussed the subject. And but his concern was there was a drought in Alberta. So that was his big concern. Like the drought in Alberta, UFOs don't care about them, so there was no consequence. So it wasn't high in their priority list. There was an instance where I talked to Lloyd Axworthy. This was at the University of Winnipeg. He was giving a presentation there. Now, Lloyd Axworthy is our, as mentioned, our Foreign Affairs Minister. And this was when Colonel Corso's book, the day after Roswell came out. And he was there, and I stood up, and there was all kinds of media there. My master's thesis advisor was there. And this was the one I was actually doing. I ended up doing a master's thesis proposal on the UFO cover-up. It didn't get anywhere because I ran out of money and I ran out of time. I'll explain a little bit about that. But I asked Axworthy about Colonel Corso, and I saw him write down the name. He was going to check into it, the book the day after Roswell. And so he was they were aware of that from that period of time. Now, just to explain how the academic thing worked. So my first year when I was in master's, my thesis advisor, after the first year, he had to went on a sabbatical to the Middle East. So I had to change my master's thesis topic and get a different advisor. And this was Paul Thomas, Dr. Paul Thomas at the University of Manitoba. And then it was Dr. Jeff Lambert, who at the University of Manitoba as well. But he then went on a medical sabbatical because he developed Parkinson's disease. So now I'm into my third, fourth year, and that's when the Roswell news conference takes place in Washington, the infamous one where they said that it's all crash test dummies. And I saw that, and I said, I'm done with this university thing. Like these are the lies being perpetuated by our governments, and I want no part of it. I want out of university, and I'm just going to quit this whole thing. But then one of my professors, Dr. James Ferguson, who was running the Center for Defense and Security Studies at there, we would talk about UFOs occasionally, and he'd say, well, why didn't you master's thesis on UFOs? And I said, yeah, I'm going to do one. But they put me through the ringer on that. They made me do it as a belief system. Like every thesis proposal that I would send to them, they would send it back saying, no, it's got to be a belief system. And I said, no, it's not, because I know all these people in the military and government, and these are the real people. No, it's a belief system. It's no different than any other belief. No, it's not. And so, okay, well, I'll do it as a belief system. And then I had already done, like, into my 5th year. I had no interest in writing on a belief system. I had no heart, and I ran out of money at the same time. So I just let it go. But I could have gone back on an appeal for the 6th year, but I don't want to pay all that money and spend another year to write about something that I don't even believe in. You know, as a belief system. So there was now here is this one, Gary Filmon. Now this guy's an interesting person. He was a former premier of Manitoba, and then that's sort of like our governor, like to be like an American governor, and in office for quite a length of time, very influential. But then he got a position where he's put on the Security Intelligence Review Committee, and this is the group that would oversee our CSIS, which is the American CIA. So if there's a body that looking over them, it's a Security Intelligence Review Committee. And at that time, Gary Filmon was a member. So I dropped down to his office here. He's in the Exchange District downtown, and I gave him the Disclosure Project videotape, and I gave him the briefing document, and we had a discussion about it, and he held on to it for about 6 months. And so then he finally emailed me, said, you know, I really can't do anything about this because it's a conflict of interest. I have to be objective about this, but thanks for bringing this to my attention. I guess he was going to bring it to the attention of all the other Security Intelligence Review Committee members. And then he became the head of the Security Intelligence. So I guess he was able to use his influence.
What do you mean by conflict of interest?
Because he said they've got to oversee CSIS. So if I'm giving him information that CSIS is threatening people, like my friends in Ontario, they've got to be in a position where they can say, well, you know, we have to be objective and be able to investigate without any kind of influence, you know, taking anyone's position. So I can understand that. So, but he was totally aware, and he was essentially, I guess he would have probably had the high security clearance in Canada if you were head of the Security Intelligence Review Committee, but they ultimately did nothing about it as well, too. Stockwell Day tried to do something about it. Stockwell Day, he was the leader of the opposition in Canada for years. There was a meeting where it was down in St. James when he was running for the leader of the leader of the opposition. Kind of a rally for a local candidate here, and he happened to be there, and I walked up to him, I put some information in his hand, and he contacted me about that. He thanked me for the information. He actually just sent me an email about that, a personal email about that. I got through to, there was also leader Preston Manning. He was another leader of the opposition for Canadian Alliance, and his son, I was able to get in touch with his son. And his son told me that he had read Clifford Stone's book about you know, that big book, and they were, you know, very fascinated by the subject. So, but Preston Manning did nothing, or was that Stockwell Days? I think, you know, I forget which one it was, but it was one of them. Like one of their sons, very interested in the subject matter. Now, this is one I'm going to explain to you. This is where I have an actual physical hard copy transcript. This was the Senate. The Canadian Senate Defense and National Security Committee that was here in Winnipeg. They're holding a meeting at the Delta Hotel. And I decided I'm going to go there, I'm going to explain the situation and see if I can get something done. And there's actual physical transcript of what I had actually said there. So I get to the meeting early, and first one there, and the whole place was empty except somebody walks in there with, sits down right beside me, had the entire place. And I'm looking at his shoes, he's got these rubber-soled shoes, he's got a military haircut. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, well, you're either military or a police agency or something, like because, you know, they're here to see what I'm, you know, doing here. And he points out at the corners of the room, do you see those things over there? That's infrared technology. They can see if you're carrying any weapons. You know, so he basically telling me, you better not be carrying weapons. And obviously I'm not. Yeah. You know, so that word just, you know, but at the same time there was a question and answer session. So I went to the microphone, and this was when I was working with Greer and Weber. This is our Canadian Exopolitics Initiative. Yeah. And I said, I represent, good evening, I represent, there's about 5 panel members there, senators. I represent the Institute for Cooperation in Space, ISIS, or ICIS, based out of Vancouver, and Disclosure Project, Dr. Stephen Greer's organization based out of Washington, D.C. I sent all of the members of the committee an email a few days ago explaining what I want to go into, but I'll get to that eventually. I should mention to you that I have a proposal I'm submitting from Alfred Weber, who runs the Institute in Vancouver. We also have 4 other directors: Dr. Carol Rosen, who's assistant to Warren von Braun, last few years of life; Danny Sheehan, a famed attorney; Edgar Mitchell, last man to walk on the moon; and Arthur C. Clarke. And it's a heavy-duty committee. And in respect to CSIS, Dr. Greer has put together this organization out of Washington where he's accumulated up to 600 military whistleblowers. And these are people that have top secret and above top secret clearance, and they come from all levels of military service, all levels of intelligence. And we have astronauts, cosmonauts. We're looking for a forum to present these people to the world. These people have the evidence to prove that they've written, or that they've been witness to what the government actually knows about the UFO issue or the extraterrestrial issue. Friends communicate with them regularly. I know many of these witnesses. And when these people try to, and some of these people I know in Canada, they tried to present documentation to the Canadian media outlets, they were told if they ever tried to do it again, CSIS would charge them with acts of terrorism and take them to the U.S. for secret trial. And I'm specifically addressing this to Senator Jim Munson. And I have this in writing. I have witnesses. I can prove this. And after they received the threats, the people associated with this, one had to be rushed to the hospital, and the information is in the email I sent to you. I've gone to members of Parliament. I've talked to John Maynard, talked to Lloyd Axworthy when he was Foreign Minister. I talked to Gary Philman, who was here in Winnipeg, and I put information in these people's hands. I've received nothing back in response from these people in 5 years. I do not know what else I can do. I gave information to Senator Kennedy and Senator Forstall last year, and now these people have worked in top secret programs. They realize that the programs are illegal, and these programs have no oversight whatsoever. They're rogue programs without any control. One of the whistleblowers is Clifford Stone, who's a very good friend of mine. Mr. Stone was involved in crash retrievals of extraterrestrial vehicles for 20 years with the U.S. military. He's also an intuitive communicator, had conversations with crash victims of the extraterrestrial vehicles. U.S. military and CSIS have tried to prevent this information from reaching the public. Now, this has gone on for 5 years, and I cannot get one member of Parliament, one bureaucrat, anyone to talk to me about the subject. We want dialogue. We'll brief you. We'll send top people from Washington. We'll send generals. We'll send admirals, astronauts, whoever you want. We'll send them to Ottawa to talk to you. These people want to know the truth about the subject. We cannot tell the truth because we've tried to, and the media calls us terrorists. And then I'm asked, why can I organize a press conference? That's contained in the email I sent to you. There was a 2-hour press conference in Washington National Press Club, and no members of the media attended. It was packed. It was in all of the media for 2 days, and then nothing. It went black. No member of Congress, no senator is going to risk his or her career stating that this is real information. It's because they've been lying for 50 years, and they're afraid of the issue. We don't want that. We just want to know the truth. And let me see. That's basically it. So they set me up with Senator Jim Munson. And so I gave information to Munson. I walked up to him after the meeting. I gave him all kinds of information, and for about 6 months period of time, back and forth from his office to my office. I was dealing with one of his assistants, giving him the best information in the world that was available through Dr. Greer. Nothing. And so eventually it led to Paul Hellyer's joining us. Now, how that came about was when I was working with Greer and Weber, we would have these 2-hour brainstorming sessions in conference calls, and so eventually when we would talk about who we're going to ask to brief next, and then Weber would write up some material, and I would take it and edit it and bring it over to them and drop it off or whatever. But Greer, he didn't know these people, so he was relying on us to tell him, well, who do we contact? And so eventually Victor Vigiani joined up with us, and Victor Vigiani and Paul Hellyer joined up with us. Paul Hellyer did get to meet with Senator Colin Kenny, who was the head of the Defense National Security Committee, but Kenny told him, this is like going fishing for a 10,000-pound fish with a 10-pound line. There's nothing I could do about it. And so eventually it got from what we were doing to Vigiani to Hellyer, and so basically we can't do anything.
So that's what Hellyer was told by.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what Kenny told him. He had a personal meeting with Kenny.
Wow.
And he thinks
that's a good quote.
Yeah.
That's a good quote.
It's like this is like going fishing for a 10,000-pound fish with a 10-pound line, and they don't have what they can't do a thing about it.
Kenny stayed in the Senate? Is he still around?
I think he still might be in the Senate because they're there pretty much forever.
Yeah.
But he he gave up right away. But it took years to get to that point. There was maybe one thing I could also mention at this point. It'll come back to me eventually.
Did you have any contact with U.S. politicians at any point?
I've tried emailing senators and Congress, but they really don't have a mandate. They can't. They're prohibited basically from communicating with non-U.S. residents.
And what indication did you get from Greer in terms of like you had a lot of conferences with him? Did he seem hopeful about what was going on?
Oh,
or
we
frustrated?
were so hopeful every single time. He's one of the most optimistic persons I've ever met in my life. Like, no matter how we tried and how many brick walls we'd run, I guess, okay, something else is going to happen. My last thing that I was going to maybe try, but with Weber, his viewpoints on political issues is very, very extreme. So I decided I want to back away from that because I really don't want to associate with those extreme political views that he has. And with Greer, I did not agree with his all extraterrestrials are benevolent and good, and none of my witnesses has ever been threatened, because I know firsthand, I'd have direct proof that one of his witnesses, John Maynard, was, and we can get into that if you'd like, if we have some time. But one of his witnesses was absolutely
Well, tell me that
threatened.
story.
John Maynard?
Yeah, the threat story, because I'm familiar with this.
Okay, so you're talking about John Maynard, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so John Maynard, he was one of the witnesses for the Disclosure Project. He was a former DIA, senior DIA documents manager, Defense Intelligence Agency, and he would have, his job would be to make sure that the pages that he would receive were all in numbered order. So he got to see all the highest level documents dealing with UFOs, extraterrestrials, but his not really to be involved in policy making, but was to make sure all the pages was there. So he had to have to read them. And so when he became a Disclosure Project witness, after that he became part of this Dr. Richard Borland news group. Very controversial person, was hard in the right place, but there were two people on that forum, myself in Canada and a person by the name of Richard Martin in the UK, who he trusted us the most. And so he would give us all kinds of information. I would say, John, you really want to share this information with me? He said, no, I'm going to have to share it with you because, I trust you. So I guess because it was his sharing of information with me and Richard actually met him when he once flew to the UK in London, he was taken into custody by U.S. officials. It was his former wife who had claimed that he, I guess, sharing documents, and she was trying to say he was trying to say it was other documents, but we know it was his UFO extraterrestrial documents that basically got him into trouble. So he went incommunicado, and we tried to find him, and I was the one who organized this mass emailing of contacting everyone in the UFO community, just everyone in the world that would have an interest in this. And so after about a week or two, what had happened? What was it? Did you just remember? Oh yeah, this is okay. So I'm keeping this in order here. And so after about a week or so of this, he phones me up and he says, Randy, I want to thank you because you're the one. They had me incommunicado in jail, and right now I'm sitting here in Buffalo, New York. I've got this electronic monitoring bracelet on my ankle, and there's this car that keeps going down the street every once in a while. But you're the one who got me out, and I want to thank you for that. And so I offered to, do you need anyone else to talk to? And he says, well, do you have a number for Steve Bassett? So I gave him Steve Bassett's number, and I gave him Danny Sheehan's number. Or no, actually I didn't give him Sheehan's number. He just gave him Bassett's number at that time. And so he was going to contact Bassett and thank him, and because Bassett was involved in this as well. But he credited me personally for that. So I felt like I had a responsibility to keep this guy out of prison, because that's where they're going after him. But I knew that he had been threatened because of his UFO activity. And at the same time, Greer was saying, no, he wasn't, but he was. So I guess it was maybe a year after that, 6 months after that, he called me up, and he said that they went after him at the LAX. He was going to emigrate to Australia to join his girlfriend, Joanne Kanda, there, and they went after him at the airport. And he said what he did was he left his laptop behind as a decoy and then disappeared. And so this was for a period of maybe a month. He would make these phone calls to me randomly, using a phone card, all different hours, saying, they're going to kill me. I don't know what to do. He'd be crying on the phone. he didn't know what to do, so I gave him Danny Sheehan's number because he finally did take it this time. He said he was going to try to contact Danny Sheehan, and that was the last I heard of him at that point. And I was in contact with Danny Sheehan, asked him, have you been in contact with him? I even got George Knapp, because I'm really good friends with George Knapp as well, too. I would send George Knapp an email, he'd send me an email like 2 minutes later. Same thing with Greer, like 2 minutes later. We were really, really close. George Knapp actually told me he was the only one I trusted out of this list of, it was called Victor Martinez's email list. He had like 3,000 people on it, these researchers. He said I was the only person I trusted because I was helping him with this character in Las Vegas. I won't even mention the person's name. Exposed this character and his girlfriend, wife Libre came, who was a total fraud. But he's been stone in the shoe for George Knapp for many years, and George Knapp will know who that is.
Okay.
And so I put him in touch with tried to put him in touch with Danny Sheehan, and never heard anything back, and even through Knapp. So I guess it was I'm going to tell you the exact date. I decided I'm going to make one more final try. So I tried calling up his dad in Buffalo, New York. No, don't know where John is. And then I finally got another number to his daughter, and I got through to the daughter's roommate, and she said he was just here like last week. I said, you're kidding. Could you please put me in touch with him? And she said, okay, sure, I'll try to put you in touch with him. And so out of the blue, one day I get this phone call. And let me just get there. Here it is. And I get this phone call, and I see it, and it's John Maynard. And he said he was really surprised that people were still trying to find him. He said that they threatened him. They told him that he can't do this anymore. And but he was very grateful that but he further in contact with me. And so just going to read you. And this is when nobody knew where he was. Greer didn't know where he was. Nobody knew where he was. And so this is a Tuesday, February 22nd of 2011. Randy, it was great talking with you last evening. Even though I did it so against my better judgment, this contact has already created a rather nasty problem for myself. As you may have suspected from our conversation, I'm monitored, but on a limited basis. It's also of particular importance that under no circumstances, and I cannot stress this enough, is Joanne, that's his girlfriend that he's going to join in Australia, to be made aware of this contact. That leak could have the most unfortunate consequences for all concerned. Therefore, it would be prudent for your own self-worth to keep this contact as a very close-held non-contact. You have my email address, by the way, it changes frequently, so let me make this clear. I have no problem with our having contact and talking with you, and we'll probably do more so in the future, but it must go no further than this for the time being. And so at that time, I'd done an interview with Alfred Weber. It was about a 2-hour interview where I went through the whole story. But we shelved that because I got back in touch with Alfred. Alfred said, oh, no, I've been in contact with him, just get rid of that interview because he's alive, and I've been in contact with him. So then, this is April the 11th. So we're talking here from February 22nd to April 11th. Now, this is John Maynard writing this, but he's pretending that his son's writing this and that he's dead. But it's basically saying, I never spoke with this. But this is, now, he's asked me not to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because, years gone past, I don't know what happened to him. Mr. Kitchur, please accept my apologies for misleading you during our conversation. Quite frankly, I never expected anyone to inquire about my father after this length of time. In regard to your inquiry, my mother also apologizes and asked me to relate the following to you. My father, John Maynard, died in March of 2005. Where he died, we have never been told. How? Pancreatic cancer. She was told that he was cremated and buried in a private family cemetery plot, but she never wanted to know where and believes that is not in the States. In this regard, I'd like to assure you that I was unaware of my father's death when I called. And again, this is John Maynard, not his son. And I had stopped seeing or talking with him about 6 months after the divorce in 2003. Knew that he started traveling extensively overseas about this time, mostly in Africa and the Middle East. I think I'm not really sure he ever returned to the States. Do not believe my siblings had any contact either. All the same, it was quite a shock to us. Personally, I'm not sure why our mother kept his death from us, except that she was and is still very bitter. We are forbidden to bring his name up, and if she knows anything further she is not about to say, does not wish to have the subject brought up against in any family conversation. Nonetheless, I was aware of my father's work and helped him from time to time during the divorce in 2003. He gave me a DVD with very specific instructions in the event he became incapacitated in some way. I do not remember him ever mentioning anything about it. He should die. I tried to make a copy once, but it was too heavily encrypted. The last time I watched it was 3 years ago. Missed him, and the DVD was my only link. It was about 2 hours long. But I remember he was very specific about inquiries, particularly if any one of 6 people made inquiries. I guess I was one of those people. Now, please accept my apologies. I feel obligated to comply with my father's wishes. Ask you to not try to contact me or my family again, and this email site shall be abandoned after I send this. In this regard, I ask that you have kept any emails or phone numbers, that you destroy the information and any material you might have relating to my father. If anyone inquires, simply tell them you think he may be dead, which is the truth, but that your efforts have not uncovered anything. So, he was threatened, and that's, no one knows where he is now, and, that's the situation. It's very sad and unfortunate. He was actually going to come to Winnipeg and visit me here, so we had a very close relationship, and unfortunately, I'm sorry I had to convey that against his wishes, but, I have no idea if he's even alive.
Wow. Okay, so final question for this section. You're sort of like a Canadian authority. There's a big cover-up going on. What do you think the role of Canada is, and what's really going on in terms of Canada?
Canada doesn't know and doesn't want to know. Basically, that's their position. But I did come across something from a person who had kind of sitting around the campfire with a high-level RCMP officer, where, according to the information the U.S. gave Canada, there are Greys and they are abducting people. And there's really nothing that can be done about that. And the Canadians are basically left at the mercy of what the Americans tell them. That's their role. It's sort of like whatever a Canadian officials get. There is the instance where you do have that person from the Emergency Measures Organization being taken to Area 51 and shown a craft in case there was ever a UFO, but that was basically the director. So you might have a handful of people in Canada that might have information. Whether the Prime Ministers are briefed on this, I know that when I was talking to Harper's people, Benoit and Harper, they were in communication, but they didn't get any information as when he was leader of the opposition. So, they're very selective. I remember, I really can't say, I'm in no position. They don't tell me, and I don't think they will ever tell me. I think any role that Canada has is just marginal. They're informed on a need-to-know basis. We'll tell you if something happens, but don't worry about it. We got the situation under control. William Tompkins did say, though, that there is a secret space program, and there are certain countries involved, one of them being the U.S., another being Russia, Canada, Australia, and I think it was, I don't want to state, any others, but Canada's supposed to be one of this secret people involved, one of the nations involved in the secret space program, and this was the one that Gary McKinnon discovered. But Tompkins was saying that, yes, there is this group of, this war, cosmic, intergalactic war between the Nordic Navy and the reptilians, and we're vastly outnumbered. The Nordics have the best ships, but it's kind of like an order of 1 to 60. It's like for every one ship we have, and we're supposed to be working with them, apparently. So this is kind of like part of, I guess, the cover-up, that there is this war. We've got an agreement to keep everything quiet, and we're not affected by it, but we've got to make our contribution. So that's my understanding, is Canada has made a contribution to this Nordic Navy-led war against this other group that's out there that doesn't wish us well, and apparently the Nazis were working with during World War II. And so I have no evidence of that, but that's what my thinking is. Maybe Canada might be involved in that. Maybe some top-level military people might know about that. They would certainly have to know about that. But it's all from what other source. I have no insight into that.
Okay.